Okay, so yesterday we were working on lesson 6, and really the core tools of lesson 6 were over here. They're the pen tool and the curvature tool. There were a couple of others that we learned to use in addition to that, but that really is the nexus of this lesson. And this is what it's supposed to look like when it's done. Here is our start file over here. Okay, so we finished up making the leaves, making the little blades of grass and that sort of thing, and we made the swan. The only thing more that I want to do is really kind of put all the pieces together and to show you how by controlling line strokes, you can add arrowheads and how you can add broken lines and things like that. Let me go ahead and I took the little head here of the cattail and duplicated it and colored it. So to color it, you just simply click on the swatches tab. They already have a number of swatches for us. Make sure that the fill is selected. So that's in the foreground. And then you can either do that from over here. You can do that from over here. And I selected to make sure that, whoops, which one did I pick? I picked this one. Okay. And then resize these. Yeah?
Professor, Deborah said that she's struggling with adding like the outlines.
Hold on. I'm having a hard time hearing you. I'm going to switch to a different speaker and see if that helps. Okay, try again.
Deborah said that she's struggling with adding the outline.
Adding the outline?
Yes.
Oh,
okay.
So let's use this as an example. Let me zoom in on the little head here of the cattail. To control the fill and the stroke of each element, you need to make sure that the fill or the stroke is in the foreground, down here, or over here. Notice that the fill is in the foreground. So that means that the fill will be affected. So let me go ahead and I'm going to switch back to the default selection. And while it's selected, I can go back. And you can see that it has a default white fill and it has a black stroke. Now, if I want to change the stroke, I need to make sure that I click on that so that it's in the foreground. And when I do, then I can come over here and I can use a couple of things. I can either use one of the colors from here. So I'll use that one and notice how it's changed from a black stroke to a blue stroke. And then when I'm ready to select the fill, I can either do that up here or I can do that from over here. But either way, if I want to select the fill, I need to make sure, or the stroke, I need to make sure that whatever I want to change is in the foreground. So now I'll go ahead and I'll change the fill. And that's done. Does that help? Does that make sense? The next thing that I want to do is change the scale of this. And I don't remember from the book, but I made it 50%. There's a couple of ways that you can do that. I can select the scale tool if I want it exactly 50% as an example. That's what lesson 5 is going to be about, is scaling and elements and doing a variety of things to them.
Professor, I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but her chat says that she's struggling with outlining the plant line and it wants to stay like the same color. And the dotted line.
Having trouble outlining the what?
The plant line.
The plant line? This,
yes.
This line right here? This doesn't need to be changed. The only thing you need to do with this line, if this is the one that I'm talking about, is the stroke needs to change from a 1 point to, I believe the book wants a 3 point. And you can change that up here. Notice how I can make it fatter, or I can make it thinner. So again, make sure that if I select for that stroke, I can select the fill and see what happens. I don't want that.
So she says that the dotted line keeps disappearing.
She wants the dotted line?
Well, it keeps disappearing. The dotted line, it keeps disappearing on her.
So for the down here, hold on. When she's doing, I think, okay, that's the next stage that we want to do that I will, let me see. If I cover this and I make sure that the background is visible, is she talking about the dotted lines down here?
No, she's talking about on the green cattail. That flower.
Oh, then probably what's happening is, let me turn this off. I'm trying to understand what's going on here.
She also typed it in chat if you want to read it.
If she's missing the background elements here, make sure that as she's creating the stroke, that there is no fill. Because that will cover up the background template. Is that what she's talking about? Because that by default, when you make a stroke or you make a path, it generally has a fill and a stroke. Well, I don't want, initially, I don't want a fill.
She says, okay, I got it.
Okay, okay. So next step, let me quickly go through these. I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna scale it. A quick way of scaling it is to just double click on the scale tool. It brings up a dialog box and I want uniform scaling. I'm gonna select 50% and notice it with preview. You can see what it's gonna look like. So that works. Then I can go ahead and I can move it. Okie doke. And anytime you want to make a copy of an object, select it, hold down the Option or Alt key, click and drag, release the mouse, and then the Option or Alt key, and then you have a copy of it. That's the quickest way of doing that. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn on, because we need to make some broken lines here. I'm going to go to Layers, and I'm going to turn on the background layer, because they've already done quite a bit of stuff for us here. And what we want to do is we want to select some of the strokes down here. For example, let's do this one. I already did this one. But I'm going to go ahead and change the stroke to 10 points. And then I'm going to add, turn it into a broken line. So, or a dotted line or a dot and dash or however you want to call it. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select the line and I'm going to change the width from 1 point to 10 points to start with. In order to make it a broken line or a dotted line or whatever you want to call it, I need to go to Window and I need to bring up the panel stroke. Okay, so here's the stroke. That was actually over to the side, but I can go ahead and I can pull that over, and I want to make sure that I see all the options here. Now, with all of the options visible, I can go ahead and let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit. It's kind of hard to see this, but you'll notice down here it asks, do you want a dashed line? And you click yes. And now you need to make or determine what kinds of dashes and gaps you want. And by default, it has a 12-point dash, but there's nothing that's set for the gap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify here, instead of 12 point, I'm going to make it considerably larger. I'm going to make it 150 points. Because that's what the book tells us. Notice that there's huge gaps between them now. And now in the gap range, what I want to do is I want to put a 30-point gap, 30. So this is something that you guys should probably play with to see the difference in how they look. So that's what they're having us do here. They're just having us explore the use of dashed lines. And then when it's done, we can go back to change it back to a 1-point line. And you can see that it's still a broken line. It looks like it's 3 separate lines, but in fact, it's just one big one that's been changed to a dashed line. Similar with this one. I already did this one the other day, and I'm going to change this to a 1-point rule. So we've got that. So now we just have to zoom out of here and zoom back in and add the other elements. So for example, we already made the leaf yesterday, but we want to use, and we want to make 2 leaves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, over here, instead of rotate, I'm going to select the reflect tool. And I want it to reflect right about this point right here. So if I hold down the Option key and I click here, notice that it automatically flips along the vertical. If you want it along the horizontal, then you would select there. If you wanted it at a specific angle, you would change it here. Well, I don't want to just click OK. I want to make a copy of it. So now I have 2. And that's, now I have my leads. Now I can select both, and I can click and drag to do that. Whoops, I don't want to do that. Let's go back to there, my move tool. Select both, and I'm going to join them together. Command J, or group them together. I'm sorry. Command G for group. And I'm going to go ahead and move it over. And that's a little bit too large. So we'll go ahead and hold down the Shift and the Option key. And we're going to shrink it down a little bit. Okay. So does that look like the right size? I'm not going to go strictly by the book. I'll make it a little bit, just the way I make it look right. So there's that. But we also, what I forgot to do, to each of these stalks here, is we want to add an arrowhead. Okay. So to do that, okay, selected that. I have stroke again, but what I want to do is we have down here where it says arrowheads. We added the dashed line down here, but the arrowheads, you can add it to the start or the end, and I wanted to add it to the end. And we're going to use arrowhead. They want us to use arrowhead number 13. Okay. So let's try that. And I'm going to make it 120%. 120. And let's see what we have here. There it is. It's the wrong color though. It's a little bit too light. So let's make sure that when I have the path selected, I want to make sure that it's dark enough and visible enough. So I'm going to bring up the panels. Let's make this a dark. Whoops, I don't want it. See, I accidentally had the fill selected. So I don't want that. So Command Z to undo. Look here. And I want, there we go. So we can see these a little bit better. Is that the right color? I don't know, but you get the idea. Okay, so let me do that for a couple more. So I'll select this one again. Another way to change colors of fills and strokes rapidly which we will cover later. But if you use the eyedropper tool, and I click on this object, notice how it automatically changed the stroke to the same one of here that I just pulled from. If I want to apply it to another shape, I hold down the Option key, and then I click on this one. And then what it does is it's like squeezing the eyedropper out. So now I can go ahead over here, and I can hold down the Option key. I can click there, and it squeezes it out. And I'll do the same thing for these guys. I'm going to select them. And I'm going to make sure that I have an arrowhead selected. I want to make sure that it's number 13, the same one that we selected before. You can see that there's, how often do you use arrowheads? I don't. Make sure that it's 120%. And then I'll select this one, do the same thing. Go ahead and select the end point, the arrowhead, 13. And again, change the size of it, 120%. I believe that's what they wanted. And so we have those guys done. Now I can come back and I'll select these leaves, and I'll hold down the Option key, and I'll click and I'll drag, and make a copy of it. Let me close this, move this over, and I'll rotate. And I'll make a copy of this. Again, click and drag, hold down the Option key, move it in place. Go ahead and rotate, and as I hold down the Shift key, it locks into 45 degrees. And before you know it, you've got it done. I mean, I could go ahead and we could, continue moving these and making the copies for the little blades of grass down here. And they need to be resized. So I'll go ahead and hold down the Shift key, shrink it down a bit, make a copy of it, hold down the Option key, rotate, like so, move it into position, make another copy, move it over, rotate, move it into position, like so. Just move it a little bit. This one, I believe, yeah, I think that's right. Hold on here. Yeah, that's right. Let's move this into place. And then I'm going to make a copy of this one. So I'll move it, hold down the Option key, move it into position, rotate it. So. Now, if I want to rotate it from a specific pivot point, and I'm kind of getting into lesson 5 right now, because you'll notice right now it pivots when I rotate this. It rotates about the center of the object by default. But if I want it to pivot about the bottom center, if I select the Rotate tool and I click on the bottom here, that changes the pivot point. So now I can move my mouse out and I can click and I drag, and notice how it pivots about that point. Likewise, I can make a copy of this one. Or another way of doing that is I can go ahead and I can hold down the Rotate key, and I can hold down the Option key and I can click on the bottom. And now I can change the rotation. I don't want it that much. Let's go back. Like so. And then instead of clicking OK, select copy, and boom, there's another way of doing that. Okay. So I think we have this guy. I mean, I could tinker with this a little bit more with regard to scale. of the objects and that sort of thing. But I think I'm good to go. So if we're okay to move forward, I wanted to show you how to start your mask. We good? Let me see if there's, let me see in the chat room here. We have a few people that have some questions. Where's my chat? And let's look at. Hold on. I'm going to pause my pause. Okay, so I have a simple illustration that it's already been illustrated, but what I want to show you is how to turn this into one that's created with Illustrator. Okay, so I'm going to start by just selecting this, and I'm going to delete it for the time being. And I'm going to bring it back in. I want to make sure that I have layers visible, and this is a piece of artwork that I got from the internet. And you just simply download it. If you guys don't know how to do that, I can show you how to download that. Another thing that I like doing to find the center of my document is to use guidelines. To bring up guidelines, you need to have the rulers visible. To have the rulers visible, you need to hit Command R. Command R brings them up. If they are not in, the rulers are not in inches, they're probably in pixels or points and picas, then you can go to Illustrator and you can go to Preferences and you can go to Units. And here under General, you can switch from pixels or points to inches. That's what I've done. And then to drag out your guidelines, you simply click and you drag to bring them out. And then when you deselect, they are other objects that simply don't print. If you want to lock them down, you can. So be careful, you can accidentally click on them and move them. If you want to remove them, you select them and you delete them. Okay. So they just provide, for me, a way of centering my object. To import an object, you can either drag it directly into it, or I can go to File, Place. Place enables you to find bitmap raster objects and put them inside your document. So I'm going to go to my desktop. There we go. And I'm going to select this one right here for starters. And here's a little small image of it. And you can see it's really teeny tiny. The thing that's kind of nice working with Illustrator is that when you start with images that you've taken from the internet, they can be very small. It's not important. You're just using them as a guide. And now what I want to do is I want to enlarge it. So I've centered it, and I'm going to hold down the Shift and the Option key so it centers from the middle outward and make it nice and big. And if it gets pixelized, I don't care, because I'm going to convert this into a vector. And I'm going to center it like so. Now, this I want to become a template. Excuse me. I want to be able to draw on top of it and use this as a guide. So you'll notice with layers visible, I'm going to rename this template. So just that I have it for by double clicking on that, the name of the layer, I can go ahead and edit it, and I'll name it template. And now I want to change the properties of that layer. I want to lock it, number one, and I want to gray it out a little bit so that I can see my drawing on top. So I'm going to double click. And you'll notice that if I click on the little checkbox, it says template. It does some of that for me already. I don't want the template to print, so I'm going to turn that off. I want it to show, I want it to preview, and I want to dim, let's go ahead and click that, there we go. Dim the image to 50%. Okay, boom. See how it graded out just a little bit and it locked it. So this is my base layer. Now I don't want to draw on this layer, I want to use it as a guide, and that's it. So now what I can do is, with the layer panel visible, I can go ahead and I can click this little box right here to create a brand new layer. And I'm going to rename this one drawing. And you can add as many layers as you want. As many as you feel you need to. So I have that set up now. Now I'm ready to build my little simple illustration. And it is a very simple one, but a very elegant one that you can, you know, if you get the basics done, you can move forward with it and you can dress it up a little bit. So what I'm going to do is, if I look at the background shape first, and I decide, well, what is that exactly? Well, it really kind of looks, if I want, I mean, I can do this in any number of ways. I could actually start with a background as a stroke. But maybe I'm going to try a couple of different things. I'm going to start with an ellipse. And I'll start from the center right here. And I'm going to click and drag. And if I hold down the Option key, we'll do it from the center. And I'm going to make it about like so. Okay. Now, what I want to do is make sure that I have a fill, or that I don't have a fill, but I have a stroke. So I'm going to use red just for contrast. And now what I can do is I can begin to change the properties of this in any number of ways. I can switch back to the Curvature Tool. And if I click on here, notice that I can bend this out a little bit so that that pulls that out. I can click on here and I can pull that out a little bit so that that matches a little bit better. I can also take the Curvature Tool. Now I'm using these anchor points as curved lines. I can pull this down a little. Take this one and pull this down a little bit until that begins to match. I can move these about, again, just a little bit. If I need to add anchor points, I can. Okay. I'm trying to make this symmetrical, so I'm trying to get these about the same. There we go. I can pull this down a little bit. And that's a pretty close match. I can go ahead, and if I want it to be exactly the same, I can do that. This little gap doesn't bother me at the moment. Now, if you want to see what that looks like filled, for example, I can flip. Flip again. So there's my basic shape. Now let's go ahead and build some of the other elements in here. And again, I want to leave this as an outline for the time being, because if I fill it, then it blocks my background image and I can't see what I'm doing. So similar to the way that we were working with in lesson 6, we want to keep everything as an outline until we're ready. When we're done with the shape, and we can go ahead and fill it. Okay. So let's try. I want to go ahead and let's work with this shape on top here. I kind of like let's deselect this one first. I kind of like the Curvature Tool a lot for this. I just think it will work nicely. I'll click here. And I'm going to click here. I double clicked. Now I can come back here as we did before, and I can move that there. Now I can click on here and I can move that there. And that fits pretty closely. Now I can click here and double click so that it's a curve, that it's a corner point. And I can move this back in here. And that works pretty nicely. And I can double click on here. And then I want to move that up. So actually, I'm going to undo that. Let's go back. Okay. So I'm going to click here, I think. And then I'm going to click here. Oops. I'm going to click here. Ah, I got to zoom in. I'm so sorry. I'm messing this up. Let me zoom in. Sometimes it's easier to zoom in. I think I'm just going to click here. And then I'm going to click here. And I'm going to click here, up here. There we go. Click here. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to refine that shape a little bit. And I'll click up here. And then I'll click here. And then I'll move over here. And I'll click there. So I actually want to double click on there, make that a corner point. There we go. So now I can come back with a curvature tool. And I can begin to move these points around a little bit until it fits a little bit better. Maybe I can add a point here. There we go. And maybe if I need to, I can move this over. Try to use as few points as you can. But if you need to, if I need to add another point, then I can go ahead and I can move that down, and that fits very nicely. I can move this one over a little bit. Maybe I need another point right here. So that fits nicely. And I'm going to add another point here, I guess. There we go. So that works out pretty well. I have that shape nice. Now, do I want to do that again for this one? I don't need to. I already have one. So what I want to do is I want to use the mirror tool. And you can do that for the entire, if you have a very symmetrical mask, you really only need to create half of it. And then you can mirror the whole thing and create the other half. But since I have already created this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the mirror tool. That's under here, or the reflect, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to hold down the Option key, and I'm going to click right here, right in the center. And you can see that as it mirrors across the vertical, I already have the other one. And look at that, it matches beautifully. Now I go ahead and I'll click copy. Now I have another one. So there's my other shape here. So let's try doing the center one here. This center shape. Now this could be done a number of different ways. If you want, you could explore using the pen tool. So let's try that. I'm going to go ahead and try the pen tool. Actually, I'm going to make these eyelids here instead. And then we'll come back to this one. I'll go ahead and I'll click here. And then I'm going to click here and drag until it matches. I'm going to come down here and click and drag until it matches. Now, this comes to a point, so what do I need to do? I need to hold down the Option key. And I need to click to remove that direction handle. And now I can click here and drag until it matches inside here. There we go. We got another one completed. Now I can come back with a direct selection tool. If I want, I can move these individual little anchor points around a little bit. And then I can also move the direction handles a little until it matches a little bit more accurately. If you need to zoom in, zoom in. I'm using my touchpad here to try to zoom in. And then move this around. I can come back over here. And now you can see I need to pull this up a little bit. Let's try to get this going here. There's a better match. Okay, so now I have this shape completed, and that was with the pen tool. And again, I'm going to use the mirror tool, make a copy of it, hold down the Option key, look right in the middle. Whoops, I didn't want to do that because I goofed. What did I do? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cancel. I'm going to make sure that I have the selection tool, not the direct selection tool selected, because if I only have one anchor point selected, it will mirror that, not the whole shape. So I need to, again, select, look right here, and hold down the Option key and click. Whoops, why is it doing that? Cancel. There we go. Let me try again. I don't know what gives with this. Put down the Option key and click. There we go. So I don't know what I was doing wrong here. It kept selecting one. I'll make a copy of it. So there we have that one. You can try a variety of other things too. So for example, let's go to the middle one here. Middle shape. Now that we might use a combination of shapes. And you'll notice that it's darker on one side than the other, so we could always split it in half. So that's something that we might want to do when we're done. But I want to make it probably one entire shape first. So what am I going to use here? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a rectangle tool. And I'm going to go from click and drag and come down here and click and drag. Okay. Now what I can do is I can use the direct selection tool. And I'm going to select this anchor point and this one. Actually, let me zoom in a little bit so I can see a little bit better. Select this one. It's really hard to see. So what I need to do is I'm going to hit Command Y. And let's see if I can't see this a little bit better. Now this is where shapes are getting confused with others. So what I might want to do is I'm going to hit Command Y. And maybe I should put this on another layer for the time being. That might be a good way to separate things, or I could hide the other ones. So I'll create a brand new layer. I'm going to take this shape right here, and I'm going to move it to the new layer. And then I'm going to lock this bottom layer so it doesn't get in the way. Okay. So now what I can do is I can maybe use the Curvature Tool. And I can click here. I can click here. And I can move it in a little bit. I can take this one and I can move that in a little bit. And I can take this one and I can move it up. And I can take this one and I can move it up. And I can click here and make it a little bit rounded. So there I have that shape. Now I can create this one. And maybe rather than make two, I can make one and overlap it. And then I can use the shape builder tool to combine all of them together. Are there more ways of doing this? Absolutely. As many ways as you can think. But because this one that I've selected happens to be so many different curves, nice, smooth, elegant curves, the curvature tool just seems to be kind of a natural for this one. It may not be for yours. And I'm going to show you another way in a few minutes here. So let's go ahead and again, I'm going to use the curvature tool. And I want to double click. And then I'm going to click here. Actually, I'm not going to double click. I'm just going to click. I'm going to come up here. And then I'm going to come down here and double click. And no, gotta be careful. See, it's getting in the way of the other things. So you have to be really, really careful. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. And I'm going to, let me take this shape. Let's do another thing that we learned. I can select this one. Zoom out. I want to select this one. And I'm going to hide it. So I'll say select. And I want object. I want it to hide it. I can't remember where it is. Object. Hide. There we go. Hide selection. Right there. So that temporarily hides it so it doesn't get in the way. I'm going to go back with the curvature tool. So see, as I'm working on mine, I'm kind of stumbling a little bit myself until I, get a feel for it. And I'm going to click here to overlap it a little bit. Double click. Double click. Now I'm going to click here. And I'm going to click over here. Okay. So again, it doesn't quite match. And that's okay. Because now I can take with a curvature tool, I can, click over the anchor point until that matches. And then I can click on this one and drag it down a little bit until that matches that end point. And then if I need to, I can add another curve. And then I can move this one until it matches. And then I'm going to move this one over. And then I'm going to click on this one until that matches. And I'm going to go ahead and add one here. And I'm going to double click on there. There we go. So for our purposes, this is a pretty close match. Not exactly. I would not be happy with this if I were working on this for myself. But I'll take this one and I'm going to go ahead and mirror it. So again, mirroring it works really nicely for a number of these. So I'll go ahead and I'll select the mirror tool and select right in the middle, hold down the Option key and click, and it makes a copy of it. And I'm going to go ahead and select copy. Now I can unhide. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Object. Now I'm going to go to Unhide. I don't want to hide. I want to show all. There we go. So that brings that back. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these three shapes. Hold down the Shift key as I select. And now what I'll do is I'll use the Shape Builder tool to click and drag between these shapes. And now it's all one shape. If I want to divide that so that I can make half of it light and half of it dark, how might I do that? We used another tool the other day that would enable us to do that. And that was hidden underneath the eraser tool. And those are the scissors. So if I click right here, that will cut that shape in apart there. And then if I click right here, that will click that part in half. So now I can show you how this works. I'll select the fill and let's bring up that. I'm going to make this sort of a darker half there. And then let's select the other half. And let's make that a lighter one. Look at that, no muss, no fuss. And if you want a stroke, you can. If you select the stroke and you say now that you don't want the stroke at all, you can select none. oops, select this again. Select this again, make sure that they are selected. And I do not want a strip. There. Now deselect. Okay. Now I have, oh, I see what I did. That's the underlying shape that's there. So now I can come back and I can begin filling shapes. I can continue to work on these and fill. And if I want, you can experiment with some patterns. So for example, if I come back in here and I select this shape, and let's select, oh, it's on a different layer that I locked. So you have to remember what I'm doing here. I can unlock these now. Accept the template. But I can select that one and I can select this. And, you know, maybe I want it to be, nope, I gotta make sure that I have the fill selected. Select the fill and I'll select that pattern. There we go. So you can add complexity by adding textures. So I encourage you to look at some of the pattern fills. Those are nice. On another day, maybe tomorrow, we can explore gradients. Okay. Does this help you get started with your mask? Any questions? Okay, so let me show you another way to work. Well, here's one here. Similar, but I'm gonna move this aside. I'm gonna get something even more complicated that looks more photographic. This is already an illustration, but this is a direct photograph that was taken of a Japanese mask. Again, very complex. You know, if you're up to the challenge of doing something really, really complicated, go for it. I encourage you to give it a try if you feel ready to go. Now, here's a little trick that sort of works and sort of not. It really depends on what you're trying to do. But if you recall, on lesson 2, 3, when we vectorized the map that they gave us, well, I can take any image and you can see here, I can use image trace. So I'm going to bring up the image trace panel. It gives me more options than this does. And you can see by default, if I look at preview, it goes to black and white. I don't want black and white, I want color. But that looks kind of cool. That might be something that you could integrate with the shapes that you create. So you might want to make a copy of that image on multiple layers. And by default, it's only using 30 colors, but there are a myriad of shapes, and I'll show you that in a minute. What if I were to drag this down and to say that, you know what, I'm just going to use 6 colors to make my mask. There's 10. I'm going to go all the way down. How about even just 4 to exaggerate the point? So it takes a little bit of work for it to do. And it's broken this all the way down to 4 colors. Okay. And I can see the preview. So now what I want to do is I want to expand this. And now you can see, if I look at Command Y, if I hit Command Y, these are all the shapes that it made. A little bit overwhelming, isn't it? So you have to be careful when you use this feature, although it might be a nice background layer that I can add additional shapes on a layer on top of it. Okay, so this would be a little bit too complicated to do that. However, the other one might make an excellent start. So I'm going to undo this so I can go back to my original photograph. I have to go back a couple of times. Okay, I'm going to move this over to the side. Oh, come on, let me zoom in a little bit. Let's move this to the side. Let's bring this one in. Because this is constructed of just very simple shapes, when I use this to outline it, it will be really very simple. So if you had a drawing that you were working from, this would be a very simplified kind of photograph. This would be an ideal way to work. I'm just centering it up because I like doing that. It helps me if I need to use symmetry a little bit better. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use image trace again. Let's go ahead and select it. And instead of 128, I'm going to go down to maybe 6 colors. And let's see what I get. The preview. Oh, went to black and white. Nope, need to go to color. There we go. So this is a cheater way to work with this one. But you'll notice it has the watermark in here. So that would be a harder one to get rid of, but at least it gets me started. Now I can expand this. And when it expands it in, as I said, if I hit Command Y, these are the shapes that it made to create this. So I have, you know, a starting point for this, but I have color box in the middle here that I can't get rid of. I can, but I'm not going to tell you how. Anyway, so that would be a way to get started, and it brings us, and it creates a group. So what I can do if I wanted to get rid of the background, if I use my group selection tool, I could come back and I could select the background shapes and I can delete them and get rid of them. I can select this shape and get rid of it and get this part of the color box. See, and then I'm set to go. And then if I want to, I can go ahead and I can make lots of little shapes that we're not even aware of. See that? Whoops, I don't want to move that. So we should have locked the guides down. So now I can, you know, get rid of these background shapes. I can put in my own background. I don't encourage you to work this way. I'd rather that you, show some proficiency in your use of the tools that we've learned. But using the image trace is another good way to get started. Now, by doing it this way, I sort of made a mistake, at least for me. I like to be able to work in a non-destructive way. And so what I would have done is I would have made a copy of this layer, locked the background layer, and then image traced on top of it, and maybe allowed some of the photographic image to show through, and then I could create my own drawings on top of it. That would be ideal for this one. See that? If I select all those, get rid of that. Let's bring this back in. So back. So for example, if I wanted to use this as my image, what I might want to do is I want to get rid of part of this background. If those of you who know Photoshop, you could do that in Photoshop first. But what I would do is I'd bring up layers. I would duplicate this layer. So by clicking and dragging on there, it makes a copy of it. So now I can lock the background and they're automatically layered perfectly on top of one another. Now I can take this top layer, and now that might be worthwhile trying to use image trace for it. Okay, and maybe try black and white on top of it. That would be kind of curious just to see what happens. So instead of color, let's go to black and white and see what happens on top of that. Now that looks kind of horrible. But again, if I were to expand that, and if I were to select the black and get rid of all of it, or if I were to select the white and get rid of all of that, that would be kind of curious to see what would happen. It's a matter of experimenting now. So if I click this black and I get rid of it, that doesn't help me. That doesn't help me at all. So it was a thought, but this would be actually probably be a better way of starting with black and white. It gives me some nice textures and shapes and that sort of thing. I hope this has helped you guys. I have a question here. Do we create a mask based on a draft or make our own? It's up to you, Emily, if you want to make a mask based on a photograph or one that you have drawn yourself. It depends on how much background you have, what skills you have in drawing. Because there are no prerequisites for the class, so no one is expected to know how to draw. So I allow you to do a simple Google search. So for example, if I were to bring this here, like so, let me shrink this down a bit. Can everybody see the masks that I have here? Right now, if you do a search for masks in Google, what it does is it gives you COVID, what are they, H91 masks, whatever. But if you put in a search for Japanese masks, or if I put in Chinese masks, and I look up images, a whole bunch of them that are really very nice. These are a little bit more complicated than what I started with my demo, because they are photographs from exact masks. But what I can do is you can select them. And this would be a good one to do, an excellent one. Because it is comprised of some very geometric shapes, lots of compound curves, and I think it's something that would be very doable for all of you. And then by selecting that, you can right-click on it, and you can say Save Image As, or you just save image to downloads, and then you can use the place feature to open it up, and as I did at the onset of my lesson, put it in the bottom layer and turn it into a template so that it grays it out, and then you can draw on it on top of it on another layer or a series of layers as you need to. Does that help all of you? I hope so. So we're about done with our hour. If you need, one of you wanted me to look at your mask. So what I'm going to do is, I guess I'll continue to, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so I can see. So let's look here. I'm still recording them. So I'm going to look here. I'm going to look at participants. Jose, are you ready to share? Maybe I should, if you want this to be private, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop at this point if there are any more questions. I'm going to stop recording, or pause recording.